This movie begins with a glimpse of the snowy streets of Milan. The house and trees are all covered in snow. Apparently, the snowfall has been relentless and very heavy. Inside the Reckey's mansion, Emma Reckey is preparing some meals and setting up the dining table with the help of the maids. Ida, the head housekeeper, comes in and tells Emma that her son, Edoardo, has invited a female guest over to join them. Emma quickly tries to work up a space for her son's guest. Tancredi Reckey, Emma's husband, sits with his daughter, Elisabetta. They are concerned about Edoardo's absence and discuss his racing when Gianluca Reckey, Tancredi's younger son, walks in. Ida already announces that Edoardo came second at the car race. Gianluca is concerned about the activities happening that day. Edoardo coming second in the race, the heavy snowfall, and Grandpa's birthday. He wants to know what Elisabetta thinks, but Tancredi mentions that she isn't in the mood to talk. Edoardo is home and goes straight into the kitchen. He sees Emma and gives her a hug. Emma thinks the lady that Edoardo has invited over must be very special to him and wants to know about her. He doesn't divulge much information, but mentions that her name is Eva. Grandpa and his wife, Allegra, arrive at the Tancredi's mansion for his birthday celebration. After Ida welcomes them, Elisabetta runs to greet her grandpa and Allegra. She hugs and kisses them on the cheek. Then they proceed inside the main house. While Emma is in the room putting finishing touches on her makeup, Tancredi comes in and informs her of the recent arrivals. She rushes to dress up even as Tancredi helps her zip up her gown and helps her put on her accessories. She rushes off to join them downstairs, leaving Tancredi in the room. Tancredi comes out of the room and sees Edoardo just in the hallway leading downstairs. He wants to know why Edoardo lost the race, but Edoardo argues that he didn't lose the race. He says the race was a tie, but they decided to award his opponent the win. He has an option to challenge the judge's ruling, but he tells Tancredi that the guy deserves the win more. While Edoardo proceeds to the sitting room, he overhears them chatting about Eva. They talk about Eva's family, and Gianluca casually mentions that Eva is from the poor side of her family. Edoardo enters the room and greets his grandpa, and also wishes him a happy birthday. Grandpa wants to know why he lost the race, and someone opines that the organizers didn't want Edoardo to win. Edoardo argues that he was beaten by a stronger and worthy opponent, but Grandpa's associate doesn't think so. He thinks the Reckeys are unbeatable, with Grandpa concurring. Allegra meets Tancredi and reveals the good news from the doctor that Grandpa is getting well. She also mentions that he has made a decision on a certain issue. Grandpa is seen revealing to Edoardo his joy that he lost the race. He thinks that the loss will take away distractions, as racing is a distraction to him. Edoardo tells him of his plans to visit the State Gallery in London. He says he wants the owners of the gallery to have a copy of the cover of his project. He thinks it's the best move for the advancement of his work. It's time for dinner, and everyone finds their way to the dining area and sits accordingly. Everyone is interested in knowing Eva. She confirms that she works in a bookshop right under Grandpa's house. It seems Tancredi isn't pleased with Edoardo's choice of guest. While they serve the meal, Allegra wants to hear from Edoardo how the race went. Eva quickly chips in, saying that he knows the guy who Edoardo lost to. She says he's a chef, and the guy's family own the bookshop she works for. They don't seem impressed with Eva's revelation, but the meal continues to be served. They serve Edoardo's favorite meal, akka. This meal is only prepared by Emma. Elisabetta is seen inside her room kissing her friend, Gregorio. She picks up a framed work made by her for her grandpa to go present to him. Her grandpa is excited and mentions that she has so many artworks of hers in his house. When Grandpa unveils it, he finds out that it's a framed picture of a garden. Grandpa isn't impressed, but Elisabetta explains that she's delving into photography and that the garden was where Grandpa took her to some time back. Grandpa forces a smile and tells Elisabetta that she still owes him a drawing. Emma tries to douse the tension by praising her, but Allegra affirms that Grandpa isn't impressed. Ida walks in with a small cake and lights the candle on top of it. Everyone is excited, even as Grandpa puts out the candle, and this is met with an applause. Grandpa gives a speech. He talks about how much the family and the business he has thrived. He says since his family has been able to tend to needs in the country, they have definitely engraved the family's name in the country's history. He warns that the Reckey factory mustn't change its name, no matter what happens. He goes on to say he has done his bit and has decided to go into retirement. He thanks Tancredi for being the son he always wanted him to be. He praises him for raising a wonderful family and how he has instilled good qualities in his 3 children. He announces that he has left his empire to Tancredi and Edoardo. He explains that it would take 2 men to fill his shoes, hence, he chose his son and grandson. This brings a little bit of confusion, but someone quickly raises a toast to the father and son. Later in the evening, Antonio, the chef who beat Edoardo, comes to the mansion to deliver a gift to Edoardo. Edoardo is both surprised and excited to see him, but welcomes him warmly. Antonio acknowledges that Edoardo gave him a tough race, so he brings a cake as a gift. Edoardo beckons on his mom, Emma, to come see, and she obliges. After Edoardo introduces the two of them, Emma wants to retire to her room, and she does. Edoardo beckons on Ida to come keep Antonio company as he rushes off to deliver a wine to Grandpa. In Edoardo's absence, Ida goes in to drop cake, and Antonia finds a way to leave the mansion without anyone noticing. Now, many months later, Emma walks across the street to a laundry shop to get Edoardo's clothes, and the laundryman hands her a disc he says he found. She goes out and opens it and finds a note inside. As she walks out, Elizabeth's voice is heard talking about her newfound love for another girl named Angharad. She writes the note to Edoardo because she thinks he's the only one who understands her and her choices. She doesn't know if Angharad likes her as well or is even into girls too, but wants to give it a try. Edoardo rides a bike to Antonio's house that is situated in a remote part of Serenmo. He meets Antonio preparing a meal, and they are both excited to be seeing each other. Edoardo, while checking the place out, complains that there are no spectacular views in their house as he claims. While he gets back and Antonio sets the table, he remarks how lovely the place is. He thinks the house is too remote, but that's exactly what Antonio prefers. Edoardo invites Antonio to his house as he's hosting a birthday party for Eva and also wants to leverage on that to propose to her. The news doesn't necessarily excite Antonio, and Edoardo playfully scolds him. Antonio says he's happy and asks that they have a drink to that. Antonio offers Edoardo a dish to try and promises that he'd love it. He complains that his dad wouldn't let him prepare such a dish in their restaurant. He plays with the idea of having a restaurant in his remote place. Edoardo advises him to go for what he wants, but Antonio realistically can't, as the place is his dad's. He promises to keep trying. Maybe one day, his dad will succumb. Emma goes to visit Allegra, who can be heard complaining to Andrea about something not going well after her husband's passing. She tells Emma how Tancredi has been up and doing after his father's passing. She wants to know how Elisabetta is, as she hasn't heard from her in a while. Emma lets her know that Elisabetta is very busy with her studies. Allegra still wants to know what Emma thinks of Eva. Emma opines Eva is a nice girl, and also feels that the most important thing is that Edoardo likes her. Allegra thinks Edoardo would marry Eva soon. In this light, and trying to keep the family tradition, she gives a gift to Emma to pass down to Eva. Ida and the other housekeepers are seen preparing the place for an outdoor dinner. Emma walks in and Ida gives her a report of how far they've gone. She proceeds to the kitchen and is delighted by the meals prepared so far. At another part of the kitchen, she sees Antonio preparing a meal, and they both stare at each other for a short while. Edoardo comes in and reminds Emma of who Antonio is, and she acknowledges. Edoardo rates Antonio's cooking so high. Antonio is preparing Russian salad and Eldorado wants his mom to show his cooking abilities and Emma obliges. With the help of Antonio, she uses a culinary torch on a dish. She doesn't do it well and Antonio has to hold her hands to teach her. This move gets them in a position that their bodies brush against each other. It's evening, and while guests are trickling in for the Edoardo's party, Emma is seen reading some magazines in her room. She dozes off and has some nightmares, but Edoardo comes to wake her up to help him fix his cufflinks. Emma is still in her room. She wants to know from Ida how far the night has gone. Ida mentions that Edoardo is having a great night. She also mentions how lucky they are that Tancredi is in London. Seeing that Tancredi despises parties, Edoardo is casually seen kissing and touching Eva's bum, while Eva caresses his manhood area before they go back to the guests. The party comes to an end. Tancredi is seen telling Emma that the party had cost more than they agreed. Emma is much more concerned about how happy the party made Edoardo. Tancredi wants to know if Edoardo is really interested in marrying her. She remarks that Allegra thinks they would be fine together. Emma wants to know how Elisabetta is faring. Tancredi reveals that Elisabetta is doing well, but thinks she's in love with Gregorio, her ex. Emma knows that Elisabetta isn't in love with Gregorio, and she doesn't like him, nor wouldn't go back to him either. They share their thoughts about Edoardo's new business idea of opening a restaurant. Tancredi thinks Edoardo is man enough to use his money how he deems fit. He complains that his father might have made a mistake elevating Edoardo in the company, as he isn't ready for that yet. Antonio is preparing a meal in the restaurant he works at when one of the kitchen staff asks him if Emma is a nice person, and he concurs. The three Rekai wives are at the restaurant. Allegra tells the story of how Tancredi revealed to her his choice of Emma as a wife. Allegra goes on to praise the friendship between Edoardo and Antonio, but Eva has her concerns. She thinks the restaurant idea is coming too fast, and he's sure Edoardo hasn't given it an in-depth thought. A special meal is served. While Allegra and Eva chat, Emma eats the meal with so much joy. Antonio comes to their table, and Emma jolts back to reality. She appreciates the meal while Allegra goes in to offer her help when he and Edoardo begin their restaurant. While the women come out of the restaurant to take their leave, Emma sees Antonio and goes over to him. After he thanks him for the meal, they have a little chat. Antonio says he plants the vegetables he uses for his meal in his yard. He mentions where it is located and tells her that's the venue he and Edoardo would use for the restaurant. She excuses herself to meet Allegra, who has been waiting for her. Emma and Allegra are at the airport to pick up Elisabetta. She is very elated to see them and hugs them tightly. As they catch up, Gregorio comes in holding a flower in his hands. Elisabetta isn't excited to see him and wonders why he came. She snubs him and asks that they leave. At home, Elisabetta complains to Emma of Edoardo's perceived closeness to Antonio. She shows Emma a picture of Engaharad and reveals to Emma that she left Gregorio for her. Emma compliments Engaharad's beauty. She doesn't want either Tancredi or Gianluca to find out yet, as they wouldn't understand. Emma is in Serenmo. She puts a call through to Edoardo and tells him she's in Nice to see Elisabetta. She doesn't allow Edoardo to reveal it to Elisabetta, as it's a surprise visit to Elisabetta's art exhibition. As she raises her face, she sees Antonio from afar and begins trailing him. After a while of trailing and bumping into people, she finally meets him. Antonio is very excited to see her, and she states her mission in the city. He asks Emma to come with him so he can show her where the restaurant will be situated. On the trip, Antonio and Emma chat. Emma reveals she loves to cook, but isn't as good as Antonio. He doesn't think so, as Edoardo has spoken very highly of her cooking. The place is a 2-hour drive from town and is located on top of a hill. He asks Emma to take a walk around while he runs in to put some things in place. The place is surrounded with hills and valleys with thick fog covering the farthest parts of it. While she sits, enjoying the ambience the place brings, Antonio comes from behind and kisses her on the lips. She returns home and goes straight into her bedroom. She apparently enjoyed the kiss, as her countenance changes. She smiles while she reminisces on what went down in Serenmo. She goes into the laundry and meets Ida, then wants Ida to dine with her, as she's become bored in the empty house. Ida thinks it's better they keep the status quo. Ida tells her that Edoardo called and would love for her to pass by at the factory. At the factory, Eva is seen walking in with Edoardo. While she goes on to wait for him at the canteen, Edoardo meets with Gianluca, who complains that they've sacked too many workers. He complains that Grandpa wouldn't have done some things the company is doing currently. Edoardo confirms that the factory is heading in the wrong direction. With the businesses and almost every family member moving to London, the house is almost empty. Antonio, who is in his father's restaurant, goes into deep thoughts. He imagines that Emma is alone in the kitchen, and immediately they meet. They rush into each other's arms. They start kissing aggressively, and it leads to sex. While he's on this thought, Edoardo walks into the kitchen, and he jolts back. Edoardo gives him the signed papers that allows them to begin the restaurant at Antonio's father's property. He sees a book and picks it when Antonio quickly takes it from him and covers it. Edoardo is confused as to why he is seemingly not happy. He says he's just a little embarrassed. Elisabetta is seen having a public display of affection with her partner, Engaharad, while Emma goes through her pictures. Emma meets with Antonio in a restaurant in Serenmo so they can finalize preparation for the next party. Before they begin, Antonio hands over the book Edoardo saw back to her. He remarks that she forgot it the last time they met. There's sexual tension between them as they can't focus on the reason they've met. After a while, Antonio takes her to his apartment. He plays the gentleman's card as he helps her take off her shoes. He goes on to take off every single piece of clothing and jewelry on her as Emma anticipates what is coming next. They start kissing and cuddling aggressively. After their session of sexual intercourse, they lay bare on the bed and chat as lovers, using cooking innuendos. Antonio mentions that Edoardo revealed to him how she prepares his favorite meal, ukka. They can't get enough of themselves as they continue making love. Much later, Emma tells Antonio how Tancredi would always come to Russia to collect artworks. She's traditionally from Russia and Tancredi met her there. She mentions that she hasn't returned back to Russia since she followed Tancredi to Milan. She states that since then, Every time she gets bored, she cooks. She reveals that Emma isn't her real name, as it was Tancredi who gave her that name. She says all that while preparing a meal. Antonio goes over to her, and they begin another session of kissing and caressing. They go out to pick vegetables. Afterwards, Antonio helps Emma in trimming her hair. While the sun shines its rays on their skin, they go unclad. Antonio begins kissing her and sucking her. Emma smiles as she is really enjoying this act by Antonio. Antonio practically every part of her body before another session of sexual intercourse. In London, Edoardo, Tancredi, Gianluca, and other partners are discussing with Shai, an Indian businessman. Shai thinks that Edoardo has brought job opportunities to London, but wants to acquire the company from the Reckeyes. Edoardo opposes the idea, but Shai tries to convince him that the company would keep its original name if he wants. It seems Tancredi is keen on selling, but Edoardo doesn't think it's best. Edoardo is out of the meeting and meets Elisabetta in the street. They go into a quiet corner, and there, he tells her of their plans to sell the company. She lets out a mild smile and remarks that they'll get richer. Edoardo isn't happy and Elisabetta wants to know why, but he remains coy. Back home, Ida sees Edoardo moody and calls out to him. He writes a note and gives it to Ida to pass it to Emma. He falls on Ida's body and starts crying with Ida consoling him. Edoardo drives down to Antonio's place and doesn't meet him. He's deep in the woods with his new lover, Emma. While he tries to wait for him, he notices a trimmed hair on the ground and he picks it up. Back in Milan, Emma is lying on her bed when Tancredi comes and joins her. Emma mentions she's tired and turns to the other side to sleep. Tancredi gives her a little pat on the back while he watches a movie on the TV. The Reckeyes throw a dinner in the house with Shai in attendance. Tancredi introduces Shai to Allegra and Emma. The three of them enter into a friendly chat. Eva corners Edoardo and suggests that he isn't happy. He argues he's happy and gives credit to everyone around, even his unborn child in Eva's womb. Emma sees the need to go inside. She ignores Edoardo's call as she proceeds inside to the kitchen. Antonio meets her by the door, and they share a brief kiss. Afterwards, she returns back. They are dining and Shai continues to talk about how the world is changing, and everyone needs to think progressively. Emma doesn't understand English, and someone sits by her to interpret. While Shai talks, he subconsciously holds Emma's hand. They serve ukka to the guests and Edoardo clocks that something might be happening. He knows that it's only Emma that can prepare ukka and wonders how Antonio learned it. He remembers Emma's book that she saw in Antonio's house. He also remembers the strands of hair he saw at Antonio's place and realizes that her mom's hair is shorter. These events make him conclude that Emma and Antonio are having an affair. He walks up to his mom and thanks her with then storms out. Eva wants to go after him, but Emma decides to do that. Emma follows Edoardo outside and meets up with him. She tries to explain, but Edoardo doesn't have the luxury to hear what she has to say. He thinks that Emma is just a cheat. She tries to stop him, but as he storms off, he angrily shakes off Emma's hands. This process makes him fall, and he smashes his head on an elevated stony place. This makes him unconscious, even as he falls into the river. They finally are able to get him to a hospital. The doctor calls in Emma and Tancredi and tells them he doesn't have good news concerning Edoardo. He has suffered a brain injury that has now led to a serious hemorrhage. The doctor also thinks that Edoardo will never become the person he was, even if he survives. Elisabetta, who wasn't available during the dinner, gets back. She goes straight for the hospital and is greeted by the family members. Emma comes to her. She hugs her sorrowfully and comforts her. They are now home. They walk up the stairs and Elisabetta heads for her room. Emma doesn't look the way of anyone and heads straight to bed. She doesn't take off any clothing or jewelry as she sleeps that way. It's the next morning. She's refusing to get up from her bed when Ida goes to wake her up. Ida helps to take off her last night clothing and change into something fresh. While Ida does all these, she stands like a zombie with no input. Edoardo is deceased, and it's the day he's to be laid to rest. Everyone is in a black clothing, and the priest is heard saying final prayers for him. Emma stands there, shocked to bone marrow about what actually is going on. Every one of the Reckeyes wears a mourning demeanor. They can't hold back the tears as the priest says those final words. Emma is mostly decanted as she knows the circumstances that led to Edoardo's passing. As they troop out of the funeral ground, the condolences begin to pour in. Emma is far from the crowd and looks very lost. Back at the mansion, Tancredi enters a large area and finds Emma's stuff on the ground. He proceeds to meet Emma, who is standing and gazing into space, and now drenched in rainwater. He takes off his jacket and puts it on her to shield her from the cold. He also helps dry her face with a handkerchief and keep warm while he guides her into the main house. Emma behaves like she's out of her mind. She doesn't speak nor respond to anyone as she would, and this bothers Tancredi. He begs her to come back to her actual self, and they should move on with their lives. While he talks, he tries to kiss Emma, but she removes her face from Tancredi's oncoming lips. This surprises Tancredi, who takes steps back and leans on the wall. Emma, after looking lost for a while, mentions that she loves Antonio. This revelation devastates Tancredi, who looks at Emma with disdain. He takes his jacket off her and wears it. Angrily, he tells Emma that in his book, Emma ceases to exist, then he walks away. While the rest of the family are in the living area, Emma runs inside frantically and heads to her room. Ida and a housekeeper follows her frantically too. Ida knows what's coming and begins helping her pack up as quickly as possible. Emma changes into something more athletic, takes off her ring and drops it. She and Ida share a very long and passionate hug, and she runs off while Ida begins weeping profusely. As she gets downstairs, she meets Elisabetta, who tearfully smiles at her. It feels like Elisabetta understands the move that Emma is about to make and has endorsed it. The rest of the Rekais are dumbfounded and are lost for words. In a few seconds, they don't see Emma again. She's vanished, out of their sight and reach. While that goes on, Eva, who is still mourning Iterato, touches her tummy in a way that suggests she's carrying Iterato's child. Emma and Antonio are seen doing what they love doing best, kissing and cuddling in a natural environment. This time, they do it in a cave.